So YouTube, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel. Today guys, I think it's safe to say that we can do the tier list early. There's not that much that we got from the latest selection pack, so we just got this Dino, which is a load of garbage. Resonator Sports, which is kind of good in its own archetype. Some cards, it can be splashable. And the EarthBound archetype got their new supports, which is also a really good splashable engine to some of the decks. Yeah, we're gonna talk about this in a simplest version for the tier list, which is tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, rogue, and some decks that needs more experimentation or supports. So without further ado, let's start. Our first deck that we're going to talk about is Black Wings. Black Wings is typically rogue. Now I know that synchros are very good nowadays, but Black Wings is just, they can really make a good board if they are unchallenged, but with the current meta nowadays for Nibiru, Maxi, Ash Blossom, Cold-Blooded Grave, Imperms, and yeah, some board breakers, they can easily be removed from the field. But yeah, also you need a ton of brain power for this to perform. Then we have branded Despia. So we recently got branded opening to 1 copy. The consistency for the branded Despia might lessen, but what they lack 1 copy of branded opening, they actually just added another card to help them gain more consistency. So it doesn't really matter. It's still a tier 1 deck, really powerful in fact, but yeah, tier 1. Then we have Dinomorphia. So the purest form for Dinomorphia, it's a really good tier 3 deck in my own opinion. Just because settling with just a copy of Rex Sturm and a copy of Kentrigina on the field, it's not that much, I can say. Regardless, really good tier 3 deck. Dinos, I've been running Dinos for quite some time now. They are a really strong tier 3 deck, I would say. But yeah, the typical cards that a combo deck is afraid of is Maxi, so that's one problem there. Nibiru is not a really big issue here because we have Miscellaneous Source to 3 copies, and with that, that is still a really strong card for a Dino deck. Then we have the new EarthBound. The new EarthBound support is, I think, it gets them what they lack for their gameplay on a pure version, but still pretty much, I can say it's rogue. Needs more experimentation, I would say. As an engine, it is kind of good though. The Stone Sweeper, the other level 1 and level 3, and then the Field Spell might be a really good card as well. But as a whole, or a pure archetype, it's still really experimental. Exo Sisters, really good tier 2 deck. Sisters has been running throughout the whole meta in rank and in the Duelist Cup. They're pretty good. Shifter is really formidable. It's still really insane. Really good tier 2 deck. Luanderies, I can say this is still a really good tier 3 deck. Just to go before Dinomorphius. I know that might be a stretch, but yeah, it's still a really strong one, especially if they can still run the trap cards, the Harpy's Featherstorm. This deck is really good, or it hasn't changed by far. Then we have Gold Pride. As a whole, it's still pretty much rogue, but if you place it as a hybrid or a mixture for the punks, it would be a really good tier 3 deck. But as pure, just go with rogue. Heroes, really good tier 1 deck. Now that might be somewhat generous for the deck, but in the right hands, if you are a really good player for the heroes, this is a really good tier 1 deck. Really solid. I think there are some ways that you can actually dissect a board if ever you have the right cards. Or if you're going first, you can actually make a really good board as well. With the plasma on the field and with a copy of Mask Change. But yeah, tell me in the comment section below if I am too generous with the heroes. Then we have Infernoble in the right hands, and of course, if you know the deck pretty much, this is a really strong tier 1 deck. There are some instances where you'll draw into a couple of equip cards, but it doesn't really matter that much. I think it's just a luck of the draw in some cases. Well, that's RNG for Master Duel for you. But yeah, really good tier 1 deck if you know how to play this deck pretty well. Kashtira, really good tier 3 deck. I think I'm gonna put this one after Dinomorphia. The 1 copy of Birth actually hurt the deck in some extent, but it is still playable. Labyrinth, really good tier 1 deck. I mean, the transactional rollback that got into this selection pack just makes this deck really scary. I think even without the Labyrinth archetype, the transactional rollback was actually played in some other decks. Actually made or found some other trap cards that can be really floodgatey. But yeah, Labyrinth with the current meta nowadays, really good tier 1 deck. Vanadium, tier 2. I think that's basically it. Vanadium is still the same until we get the new Samsara, so that might change in time. But at the moment, it is still a really good tier 2 deck. Marinces, I would say it is a really good tier 3 deck. There are some instances where you can be stopped with your combo, but it doesn't really matter because you can just settle with one card in the field. Kaijus are not really like prominent nowadays, so you don't have to worry about it. Also, the trap card is just an insane one. Then we have Mathmech. Mathmech, as long as Circular is on 3 copies, this is a really good tier 2 deck. I think last month we placed this one on a tier 1 status. Nowadays, just put it on tier 2. Really good deck still, but the parallel exceed to 2 copies just makes it a little bit nerfed. Go down 1 tier, if I would say. Mechanicus, I really hate this deck. But really good tier 2 deck. I think this is the new Numeron in some cases there. So just put this one on tier 2, or on tier 3, I mean. Runic, basically Rogue as a pure deck. There are a ton of hits to the Runic archetype, of course. But if you pair it with some other archetypes like the Naturia, this might be a really strong deck, but as a pure, basically Rogue. Or experimental, either way. Yeah, just put it on experimental. And then we have Pendulum Magicians. So Pendulum Magicians, it is basically tier 2 deck, in my own opinion. I dealt with a ton of Pendulum decks as well, and they are one of the most annoying decks to actually play on, or to play against, I would say. Punks, in a sense, is a rogue. But like I said earlier, with regards to the Gold Pride, if you mix this one up, this is a really good tier 3 deck. But yeah, as a pure rogue. Purelies, just place it on rogue. The Lily on 2 copies hurts the deck a bit, and also the Delicious Thingy, the spell card, on 1 copy is kind of nerfed. I'm not sure if it would change by much if we'll get the new Purely Noir, or the Little Noir, I would say. But yeah, let's see in the near future. But at the moment, it's pretty much rogue. It's still playable though, but it's rogue. And then we have Rescue Ace. So Rescue Ace, really good tier 2 deck. Now, the deck is still consistent, and by the time we'll get a copy of Bonfire, this deck will actually spark. Spark, we would say. That's a really bad pun. But at the moment, they're still a really strong tier 2 deck. I think after, or before, Mathmech. The reason for this is because once they set up the board, they can just negate everything else or pop everything else. Maxi is not really a problem. Nibiru is not really a problem. Duel and Lockbird is not really a problem for them. It's just basically Imperm and Ash Blossom. So 3 out of the 5 hand traps that can stop a Rescue Ace, they can actually like play through it. So that's basically Rescue Ace. Then we have the new Resonator supports. Resonators are, I would say, they got better. I think I'm gonna be generous with this deck. I'm gonna put this on a tier 3 status. It's just because I had a lot of fun with this deck, and I really do love decks that gain a ton of attack power. But yeah, that's being too generous. If not, this is basically Rogue. Rika, really good tier 2 deck. I think after around this part right here, beside Mathmech, Rika Sun Avalon is still a really strong deck if you know how to play the deck. Scareclaw, tier 3, very good going second, very good going first. Depends on the build that you're going most of the time. I'm gonna put this one here. Yes, I'm just gonna put this one after Marinces. Then we have Sky Strikers. Sky Strikers, practically rogue. You know what? I'm just gonna put this one on tier 3. It's still a really good deck though. Although working with spell cards and snowballing, it's not really the format nowadays for Master Duel. So I'm just gonna put this one on tier 3. So I'm gonna put this one around here, possibly between Marinces and Scareclaw. Then we have Snake Eyes. This is basically tier 1. I mean, I just said before that Snake Eyes would be like tier 2 or tier 3. But, oh, I was wrong. So wrong. So, yeah, Master Duel is a different format. I always forget that. Really strong deck. Sprites, typically experimental. They are still playable, I can say. They can still play out the game, but you need to have the correct cards in this deck to actually make this better. So, a ton of hits to the deck. Got worse from a time, but it just needs more experimentation to make the deck good. Super heavy. I'm gonna put this one on. Am I being too generous on super heavy on tier 2? You know what? Yeah, sure. Let's go with that. I mean, it's still a really good deck. But you know what? I'm gonna put this on tier 3. Probably around these parts right here. So yeah, I think that's really understandable. Tier 3 after Floowandereeze. Then we have Sword Soul. Sword Soul is, although pretty much it is a rogue deck, on a purest version for the Sword Soul, they are still really good. I mean, if you're a new player trying to learn the deck, you have a higher chance of gaining in or getting into Master 1 with just Sword Soul alone, as long as you have the right cards in your deck. Synchrons, the new Synchrons, I mean, it's still pretty much rogue. There are some cases where you'll break into some of the cards that you don't want. So I'm gonna put this one on rogue. Even if you experimented on the deck, it's not bricky, I would say. It's just RNG. I think that I can say that, right? It's just RNG. It depends on your hand most of the time, and it depends on the coin flip as well. So yeah, rogue for Synchrons. Tier elements, tier 1. Nani? I mean, sorry. My god, I think I blacked out for a minute. Tier 3. Tier 3 for tier elements. I mean, let this deck die. I mean, each month they always get some crazy supports, even in the form of one card, and that just made them climb one rank higher or one tier higher. Pretty much, I think, around this part right here, it is still tier 3 for me. TG, rogue deck. Pretty much you can do everything else on Snake Eyes and TG deck. There are, but in a purest form, it is still practically rogue. The board, your end board is not typically like a really strong one unless you add also the Etude, which you can go into the Calamity Lock, which in terms nowadays, it is really normal. Man, that's gotta stop. This is basically a rogue deck with or without a Calamity Lock. Then we have Thunder Dragons. Thunder Dragons, really good. I think you just need to put this one on the right cards or in the right tier, I would say. Maybe before Dinos. Decina, really garbage deck. Just make it rogue. Experimentation, I don't think they can still be experimented on. The deck works just like you're playing a ton of Book of Moons and Book of Eclipse. It's kind of good in a time, but in some cases, you'll just end up with like a demigod with a copy of your God of Destina. So it's either one of those, and then there's no way to actually protect your monsters from that. If ever, they'll just remove it or send it to the graveyard. Trap Tricks, really good tier 2 deck. Now, I'm just being generous if I'm going to put this ahead of Pendulum Magicians. You know what? Tier 3 deck. I think I'm just being too generous with this archetype. I love the archetype as well, but I think I'm just being biased with this deck because I like it. And put this one around... wait, Sword Soul is not here. It's supposed to be like around here, and then Trap Tricks is going to be like... yeah, just beside Scareclaw. Trap Brigade, really good rogue deck. If you mix it with the Sprites, it might be a really good deck as well. Vanquish Soul, tier 2. Maybe just around these parts right here. That's still understandable. And Zodiacs. I mean, if you mix it with Kashtiras, really good like tier 3 deck, I would say. But yeah, that is the tier list for you guys. Tell me your thoughts on the tier list that I made. Do you agree? Do you not agree? Whatever. Comment section below. Tell me your thoughts. Anyways, that is it for the video today. Keep safe, good luck. If you like this kind of content, like and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.